Have you thought about upgrading or buying a new PC next year? What if I told you that the components, the memory, the RAM, the DRAM in your PC might be scarce, overpriced, or downright impossible to get? What if the memory crunch triggered by massive AI infrastructure demand doesn't just drive up PC prices, but threatens the entire gaming ecosystem? Global DRAM prices are surging. Top-tier memory is being diverted toward AI data centers. Console manufacturers are bracing for price hikes, and GPU memory shortages are already creeping in. If this continues, 2026 might be the year gaming as we know it takes a massive hit. To understand the urgency, you need to see just how big the memory demand spike is. Recently, memory chip makers have dramatically raised prices. According to a report published just weeks ago, contract DRAM prices have surged 171.8% year over year as of Q3 2025. DRAM, a component considered a commodity hardware for decades, is now appreciating at rates that outpace even precious metal. What's driving this? Huge AI infrastructure projects. Memory makers and analysts mark out that high bandwidth memory and server-grade DRAM for data centers are being prioritized, often at the expense of consumer-grade DRAM. In simple terms, data centers and AI workloads are eating up the global memory supply. According to some sources, major memory manufacturers have raised DDR5 prices by as much as 60% since late 2025. Others report that memory makers are delaying contract finalizations. 1 week alone saw DDR memory prices climb 25% after contract delays. That means the hardware foundation for PC gaming, console manufacturing, and GPU supply, all heavily dependent on these components, is suddenly under intense pressure. For gamers and devs alike, this isn't just a bump in price. It can threaten accessibility, the upgrade cycle, even the viability of new hardware releases. And because gaming relies on that hardware ecosystem, a choke point in memory supply could cascade across the entire industry. The core of this issue rests on memory availability. As of late 2025, memory chip manufacturers are increasingly shifting production capacity towards server-grade DRAM and high-bandwidth memory, driven by AI infrastructure demand. That reallocation is squeezing the supply of consumer-grade DRAM and GDDR. The result are soaring prices. For example, 32 gigs of DDR5 modules recently surged from about $149 to $239, roughly a 60% jump. In some segments, prices are forecasted to rise 30 to 50% every quarter from late 2025 through mid-2026. Even legacy DRAM, DDR4 modules used in older systems or lower-cost builds aren't safe. Suppliers are winding down DDR4 and repurposing capacity to newer AI-heavy memory demands. That has triggered restocking frenzies, consumer-level price hikes, and tightening availability worldwide. For console makers, GPU manufacturers, PC builders, and consumers alike, this means hardware costs are rising fast. What once was cheap, easily available, and replaceable becomes a premium commodity. Mid-range GPUs or budget builds could vanish, creating a barrier for new gamers and leaving existing gamers locked onto old hardware. Consumer GPUs use GDDR, and many upcoming GPU launches depend heavily on high bandwidth memory. With memory becoming both scarce and expensive, GPU manufacturers are already warning of price increases. For instance, AMD recently announced that graphics card prices will rise by at least 10% in 2026, and this may just be the first of many price increases. For mid-range GPUs, the sweet spot for many gamers, a 10% price hike might push them out of reach, turning them into luxury items. This shrinks the install base of capable gaming PCs, reduces demand for new games, and even discourages developers from targeting high-spec builds. For consoles, the outlook isn't much better. Consoles already rely on these same components. Reports already suggest that some consoles might face another round of price increases due to memory shortages. If consoles become more expensive or their production slows due to component scarcity, the barrier to entry for many gamers goes up, especially younger players or budget-conscious buyers. That's a problem for the long-term health of the gaming user base. Rising hardware prices reduce the base of potential players. That weakens demand, discourages developers, and could lead to fewer new games, more postponed projects, or shifts toward lower-cost game formats. Let's say you're a gamer who upgrades your PC every few years with a mid-range GPU, new RAM, faster SSD, maybe a console refresh every generation or two as well. Then what happens when GPUs become expensive, RAM is scarce, and console production slows, and the consoles themselves pricier? Fewer people will upgrade or buy new hardware. Many gamers, especially younger or budget-conscious ones, may skip upgrades entirely. New entrants to the hobby may stall before they even begin. That means a shrinking install base for new games, fewer sales, and reduced demand for new big-budget titles. Developers might respond by scaling down projects, focusing on smaller-scale games, or shifting to platforms with lower hardware demands, such as mobile. And ironically, this could create a negative feedback loop. Fewer players lead to lower game sales. Lower game sales leads to studios cutting costs. That leads to fewer high-quality releases, and even even fewer players down the line. The memory crisis doesn't just raise hardware prices, it threatens the demand side of the entire gaming economy. A shrinking player base could force the massive rethinking of what kinds of games are viable. And we're starting to see early signals, rumors, and cautious statements from hardware manufacturers and industry watchers. Some console makers might be forced to raise prices or delay production due to memory shortages. According to recent leaks and reporting, global RAM shortage could push up the cost of consoles such as the Xbox Series X, and further price increases are expected in 2026. GPU makers appear to be bracing for a price jump across gaming GPUs. And as I previously stated, AMD will raise GPU prices by 10% next year. AI projects are reportedly securing massive long-term memory orders, diverting large amounts of global DRAM output toward AI infrastructure instead of consumer electronics or gaming. Meanwhile, some hardware component makers are stockpiling, a sign of fear that supply will remain constrained for a while. So, if this continues, then what could happen next? Well, from 2026 and perhaps onward, memory remains scarce, prices soar, mid-range GPUs and consoles become rare or expensive, and many gamers stop upgrading or buying new hardware. Studios then face squeezed budgets and uncertain returns. Many switch to smaller scale projects, delay or cancel AAA games, or they shutter them entirely. The gaming release calendar slows, live service games get fewer updates, fewer ambitious titles get greenlit, and the gaming user base shrinks. Developers pivot to safer bets, mobile games, remasters, low-cost indie games, but overall creativity and investment decline. Later on, memory shortages could ease slightly mid-2026, but supply remains tight. Hardware costs stay elevated for a while. Developers adapt though. More games built for lower-end hardware. Optimization over raw fidelity. Modular or scalable games that target a broad hardware spectrum. Indie studios, solo devs, and art and design-oriented creators thrive because they don't need top-tier hardware, just good ideas and an efficient pipeline. Console and cloud-focused gaming may grow, as big hardware purchases decline. Subscription and streaming models may take a larger share, and their prices may increase. And while everything I just said does sound bad, I think what will eventually happen is going to be good. The shock drives a rethinking of what makes good games. Less emphasis on graphics, more focus on gameplay, storytelling, creativity, and community. Smaller, passionate teams produce meaningful, niche, or experimental games, the kind that might have been ignored in a full-budget era. And modding communities, retro-style games, stylized indie hits become more common and celebrated. The gaming culture shifts. Not every release is a spectacle. Instead, meaningful experiences, more accessible, more diverse, less resource-intensive define the next era. By 2026, gaming hardware could become more expensive, scarcer, or unattainable for many. Mid-range GPUs and consoles could retreat behind steep price walls. That in turn threatens not just PC gaming or console gaming individually, but the entire gaming ecosystem. Hardware supply, development cycles, consumer demand, studio viability, and ultimately game diversity. That said, collapse isn't guaranteed. If memory supply gradually recovers or adapts, we might instead face a long shutdown or renaissance rooted in creativity over hardware. The most resilient studios won't be the ones chasing fidelity. They'll be the ones focusing on gameplay, storytelling, efficient design, and community. For players like you and me, that could mean pain in the short term. Pricier hardware, fewer upgrades, slower release schedules, but for creators, modders, indie devs, and art-driven studios, this might be an opportunity. The barrier for AAA budgets might rise, but the value of vision, creativity, and clever design might shine brighter. If I had to predict, I'd say 2026 will be a turning point. Not the end of gaming, but the end of gaming as we've known it. The next era will be leaner, more frugal, and perhaps more genuine. More about fun, creativity, community, and less about specs, graphic cards, and performance wars. So stay tuned, stay skeptical, and if you're a creator, stay creative. The landscape may shift, but gaming isn't dying, it's evolving. If you like this breakdown, hit like and subscribe, and drop your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching.